annoying, annoying
Okay.
button there.
Perfect.
And so, like I
Good.
said, this is really for you. This is for you to ask questions. If I'm breezing through something and you're like, wait a minute, that's a good point, I want to find out more about that. Actually, and to that point, it was in one of these webinars that one of the people said, well, I can't see what's there because I'm not a patron, but how do I know if I want to be a patron? I don't want to pay if I don't like it, whatever. And I'm like, I didn't even think of that. So a lot of times the conversations that happen in this webinar are the things that make my Patreon better. So I rely
Right.
on,
Cool.
I'm giving this to you for free, but I think I might be siphoning good information at the end. So,
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
all right. And I'm going to do a screen share. So I'm going to go away and hopefully you see, well, I'm still kind of here, but you see 5 ways your support matters on a big screen.
Right. Yep.
Awesome. All right. So even the fact of the name Patreon, it does come from the idea of being a patron of the arts. So
Right.
that's why it's like a weird thing, but it's a legit thing. It's just a weird thing. And most people are like, well, what is it? So my best explanation of what Patreon is if you're an artist, you typically artists don't have the marketing skills or the technology skills or all of those things. So Patreon was started by a musician who wanted a place to share his work without like commercials. Like YouTube will have commercials or paid advertising, and he wanted to create a place that created a community, and so he could release stuff to his public without it having to be that it was through YouTube or a third party or something like that. So he created Patreon, and basically he did all the work, all the tech stuff. So if you and I were going to do this on a website, it would cost us tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
But Patreon has done it and curated it so that artists, creators can have a place that they can use almost like this virtual studio and invite their audience in. And that's why it's a little bit different, because somebody else has done the work. It's not my website, it is another website. And I'm called a creator on there. And I bring this up because it is confusing. We're all creators. But when it asks to search for creators, they're saying searching for other artists on Patreon, and that's what you put in there. Because I think that's a weird term. If it's for artists, by artists, well, then artists are the people that are following. So we're all creators. All right, and so this is my best visual because I am very, very visual.
Yeah.
Imagine Patreon is this cool urban building, and each one of those buildings' windows are studio spaces. And so basically you open the front door and you are in creator heaven because you're like, oh, I'm going to walk into this artist studio and this one. And Patreon actually appeals to a broad audience. They have gamers, they have crypto people, they have podcasters, they have musicians and painters and illustrators. So it's really just this collective. And so when you log in, when you have an account at Patreon, you're virtually saying you have the ability to go into any one of these rooms. So when you become a member or a subscriber, you're subscribing to one of the artists there. And that fact, it's not a cool building, it's just in your computer. Which is kind of good because I joined Patreon just before COVID hit. What a gift that was, because not only did I get hit by COVID and my business, but I also lost my physical studio. So I needed this next step of like, what do I do next? And this virtual studio was like, anybody can come. This is actually brilliant. And that's how I got started into it. And so when, like I said, you walk in, there's a whole bunch of studio spaces, and I just happen to be one of the studio spaces in there, but there's lots of artists to explore. All right. So what is it? Basically, it is a subscription platform. So they don't decide the membership, they don't decide anything. They just give it all to you on a silver platter and say, okay, you decide what your audience wants, what the tiers are, how you want to organize it. We'll just put all the options here on a kind of silver technological platter. And what this means is artists like me can continue doing the art that I love, and you're helping to support that. You become a real life patron of the arts, which is kind of cool. And the hard truth, which you did touch on, but you know, it bears to be said again, is when COVID hit, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And Patreon basically saved my business, saved my life, gave me a place to still collect a community because I had lost my studio space. So Patreon to me is a gift of hope. So what happens there? This is the other big question. Why is it different? Why aren't you doing this on your website? Why is there a second place that you're doing it? Well, I talked a little bit about that subscriber thing. If I was going to set up something on my website that was as robust as what Patreon has, it would be tens of thousands of dollars. So it's a fortunate thing to have this secondary platform, but it isn't on my website. But what happens there? So I used to do online classes, and you just buy the class and it's yours forever, and you'd go to the classroom. But then I realized, number one, that happens in a vacuum. I don't create in a vacuum. I don't say, I'm going to make something today and here's the start. And after 6 weeks, it's finished and that's done. That's not actually how I work. It's how capitalism works, but it's really not how artists work. And so Patreon gives me the ability to ebb and flow in my natural state. Like one day I might be doing acrylic, one day I'm doing mixed media, I'm doing art journaling, I'm doing portraits. Like that's how I real life looks like. And so by opening the door to my studio, I want to give you real life. I don't want to give you packaged in a class kit and this is what you get beginning and end. And if you have a problem, let me know. I want it to be that it's a conversation, it's an exchange. And so you're getting access to lessons. I do monthly lessons that are brand new, only exclusive to Patreon. But there's polls and there's discounts. I mean, there's a ton of things. Basically, this is my full-time job and I'm rolling everything into what I do over on Patreon. This is another thing that I think goes unnoticed. So it's a subscription. So if you subscribe today, you have access for the month of February, but you don't just have access to the content that I'm putting out for February. It just opens the door and gives you free range to everything I have put on Patreon. You have access to everything I've put on Patreon for a month if you only subscribe for a month, but you have access to everything. So it's not just like you pay for a month, you get a month, or I pay for a class, you get a class. If you're deciding you want to join because there's something I'm doing there and you're paying like $20, you're actually getting access to everything I've ever done there, even if it's just, I want this month, this class, what I'm doing. Art critiques. So there's tiers, and I've come, now that I've done this for a while, come to know that there are people that are on all different levels that would really like this community or this bouncing off of things. And so when I was coming up in the industry, I was wishing there was somebody I could ask the questions to, because this isn't a real job. Like there isn't a phone book you open up and then like you come to artist marketing manager. That doesn't exist. So there were all different levels. And so I put in art critiques because some people just didn't have the circle around them that they could bounce business ideas or get critiques on their work. People around them were saying things like, "Oh, that's great, honey, good job," but it wasn't really what they wanted.
No. Like posting on Facebook, everybody loves it.
Right. Because nobody, well, I mean, there are some people that will put stuff out there and be like, "You're a hack, go to hell." Like,
Oh,
you're like,
I haven't had that yet.
And then there's also a business tier. So things like, how do you frame your artwork? How do I get in a gallery? All those things that maybe if you're working from a hobbyist to maybe a more professional or just get a side hustle from it, you might have questions about. So I make that available as well. Oops, wrong way, go back. I do a tier that's called the collector tier. This actually came out of COVID. One of my followers was like, "Listen, I just want to make sure you make it. I just want to give you money." And the only way I could really reward something like that was to send art in the mail. So I started the tier. It's a $100 tier. And basically every month you have access to everything, but you also get a little piece of artwork just as a thank you every month in the mail. And I kind of mentioned this, but a lot of times it's just about the engagement. My community is actually really involved. They share, they want to know more, they're just active. So it's just another chance to build a community. And I kind of realized after COVID, I thought I was an introvert. I definitely am an introvert, but I really needed my people. And I don't just mean people, because technically I don't really like people. I like my people, artsy people, people that talk the same language. They know the crazy, and I miss
Yeah.
that. All right. So I just want to share some lessons, because this came out of that last talk too, of like what happens there I want to see. And so this is just a little snippet video, and then I have some stills for you. But, this is what the videos look like over there. Because people are wondering, what's the video quality? What's happening? And I have anything from art journaling to color studies to sculpture to encaustic to, anything that I am dabbling in, I share on Patreon. It's just basically, like I said, opening the door, letting you in, and explaining what I'm doing and why. So that was a little visual of the movement, but here's some still shots, florals and figurative and collage and all that kind of stuff. And these are just sample lessons from the past 2 years, I guess, technically, that are there and waiting for you to take part in. And the other thing is, how much does it cost? My favorite part of it is that you get to decide. So I set up 5 tiers, and they weren't immediate. Immediately, I had 3 tiers and then decided we did need more. The first tier, which I call the Patreon Lite, or the introductory tier, these are for the frightened, or the people that just, I don't want any of the crazy stuff you do, Donna. I just want art journaling. I miss Inspiration Wednesday. I used to love when you did that. And so I brought it back at this $5 tier. So every month I do a brand new lesson in Inspiration, and it's called Inspiration Any Day. It used to be called Wednesday because I launched it every Wednesday, but now it launches on the first of the month, which is not always a Wednesday. But this tier also has other things, but the main focus, the main crux of this tier is for my art journalers that really wanted inspiration any day, wanted kind of just the basic stuff of what I do, not the in-depth paint and color study kind of stuff. The $20 tiers, and also to mention, as the prices and subscriptions go up, it includes everything that came before it. So the follower tier at $20 includes the $5 fan tier. But this one has the Inspiration Any Day, but also is like the meat. I would say this is the heart of my Patreon. It includes all of my tutorial lessons. This is color studies, florals, figurative, abstract, anything and everything I am working on, encaustic, figurative, art booking, altered book, things like that. So this is my most popular tier, just because you get more bang for your buck. The other thing is too, for anybody in this tier or higher, when I do online classes or when I do exclusives, you get $20 off the price of the class. So it's kind of like you're getting Patreon for free, but I don't make that available to the $5 tier. Most people say, why isn't it available to that? I'm like, that's like totally a bad business deal to pay $5 to get 20, but paying 20 to get 20, that seems like a better proposal. So this one is, like I said, the most popular for that reason. The member tier, this has a lot of the hobbyist to professional perks to it. So again, includes the $20 and the $5 tier, but on top of that includes an art challenge, a business tip. This also includes a monthly art critique. So it takes the hobbyist, and even if you're not sure if you want to do this as a business, or you're trying to wonder how much do you need to know, it's really good for that, because you can ask questions, but you can also just go through all the published content there and see if that's what works for you. And then I talked about the collector tier, the art and the mail tier. Again, includes every one of the tiers before it, the 49, the 20, the 5. But this, you just basically get everything, all those perks, and an original piece of artwork in the mail. Which is kind of fun for those people that like to get stuff in the mail that are in Kit Club. I find too, the Kit Club people, they're like, listen, I just want to get something in the mail from me every month. So I'm like, okay. I added this tier because I was finding, especially when COVID hit, there were a lot of people that wanted mentoring, but they weren't really ready for mentoring. It's kind of like mentoring is for someone that's all in and working in the professional world and needs to help with accountability and structure and stuff like that, where what they really wanted is just the conversation. How do I fix this? What can I do different? I'm struggling with this. They wanted to be at a place to talk. So this tier includes everything that came before it. But it also includes a monthly meetup. So we usually do Zoom. At least the people that I've been working with have been doing a Zoom. It's typically an hour, but sometimes there's 2 if it's like, I really need to talk to you about this or something like that. Sometimes it's just text, sometimes it's just emails in addition to the Zoom. But basically, I found that this subscription tier was people that really wanted to learn, really wanted to take advantage of what was on Patreon, and also wanted a little bit more than I offered on Patreon. And my regular mentoring is $250 a month. And that's usually, we meet 2 to 4 times a month, but it doesn't include Patreon. So that's why it's the kind of same thing. All right. So this is kind of the things that I think people don't know. Even people that are subscribed on Patreon don't know. So I always like to go through some of the things that I think are really unique to Patreon. So it's accessible on your schedule, which is maybe a given, but if you log in at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you basically, I like to refer to as, you have the key to my studio. You can come and enter and walk around and look anytime you want. You could fluidly move between tiers. What does that mean? So when you make your account to Patreon, you're not necessarily following anybody. You just have an account and you can follow. But if you decide to say, follow me, and you're like, I'm just going to subscribe at the $5 tier because I don't trust this and I'm not sure what's there. Then you say, you know what? I get it. I want to move up to the $20 tier. You just go into your account, change your membership. If you say, I'm going to start at the $20 tier, but I don't really like what's here, I'm going to go down to the 5, you can change it at any time and go back down. But here's the financial kicker to that. So every month, and they're changing it. It just hasn't taken effect yet, but every month they charge on the 1st of the month. So if you sign up today, you're going to get charged on March 1st. Just keep that in mind because it's on the 1st of every month. You sign up at $5. And then 2 days later, you say, I'd really like to go up to $20, and you up your membership. You would have paid $5. And then when you up your membership, you're going to pay $15 more to equal 20. If you decide in 2 days, that's great. I want to go down to the $5 next month. I just wanted 1 month at that. If you go down to $5, you won't get your money back. You're still at $20, but you will have access for the month of February to all the content at $20. It won't go back down until the following month, say March. So you can decide, and this is really, I have a couple school teachers that kind of go with this too. They subscribe at the $20 tier until school's out. And at the summertime, they subscribe at the $49 tier. And then once school goes back in session, they go back to the $20 tier. So I just think that that's, because there's no like lock-in. You're not signed up for a year. You can join in just for a month, see what's there, or say I'm busy for the next 3 months, I'll come back. The other thing is Patreon just implemented annual memberships, which is a year. So don't be confused. But you could choose an annual membership and you save 10%. So if you're like, listen, I'm all in, I'm going to be at the $5 tier. I'm all right to give 5 times $60 plus 10% off for the year to have access to everything Donna does at that bottom tier. Then you can go ahead and sign up at that. You can't unsign up from the annual membership though, but you can up it. So you're like, I'm at the $5 tier, but I'd like to be at the $20 tier for the remainder of the year. They'll do the difference for that. No commitments, I talked about that. So who are my patrons? I always share this because I think it's fun to see the faces of the patrons. They're from all different walks of life, all different age levels, all different criteria levels, meaning I have watercolorists to mixed media, hobbyists to professionals, just starting out like brand new, know nothing, to I've bought everything in the store that there is to offer, and I'd now like to know how to use it because I've just been hoarding it. So I just think it's kind of a fun little snapshot of they're just everybody. They're real artists, real people, just like you and I.
Well,
And then I did solicit some feedback from my patrons. I've got patrons from all different tiers. You can see they've been around forever. So I thought I would just kind of share with you just some of what they're saying. Each tier brings with it something each person wants. Like, so Debbie just wants most tutorials she can get. So this $20 tier makes total sense for her. Ellen likes the critiques. She kind of likes to be involved in everything that's going on. So she just wants to not be left out of anything in the mix. At least that's how she says it. Edie is the reason why I started that collector tier. She said, I just want to support you. I don't want you to fail. So that's why I have to mention Edie for that $100 tier. Cindy is somewhere between hobbyist and professional, but really likes to take advantage of communicating regularly. She likes the accountability. So that's why she is at the top tier. She's also just a big supporter, used to come to events at my studio and just said, I miss you and I want to still be a part of it. So, all right, this whole thing was started about the 5 ways your support matters. So now I'll go back to that. But community, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like I didn't know how much I needed other women, and not that there aren't men. There are a couple men in on my Patreon, but I just needed that support from women, and we're just powerful. And so this community really has taken on that. It's not about me become my patron. It's how about join us? This is what we're doing. So I love that. I'm so probably honored. It's probably one of the most powerful things I've ever done to develop a community like that. A lot of exclusives. Like I said, this is my full-time job. So I am constantly working. I took this out, but it is probably embarrassing. So don't judge me. But I am so type A. I think this is because I'm a Virgo, but this is what I do. I come in here and I'm like, this is what's happening this month. Red dots are Patreon posts, blue dots are other things. And this is kind of how I greet the day and I judge myself based on Patreon. Co-creation, what's been interesting about this is I started implementing polls, and that started the conversation ramped it up a little bit more between this is what I'd like to see, this is what you're doing. Hey, now I feel like you do solicit my feedback, so I'd like to tell you some more. And it just became this world of co-creation. We grow together. All access, I talked about that idea of being, I feel like I give you the key once you're a member, no matter what tier you're at, come on in. Oh, hello, Alexa. No, that was weird. But you can come on in, I give you the key and you can kind of rifle through my studio. Alexa off. Supporter of the arts, again, patron of the arts. You're the reason I'm able to do this. You're the reasons I'm able to make a living. Your support has helped me do things, especially when COVID hit, to buy microphones and lighting and to pay for platform fees and things like that, that just were new because I didn't have to do those kinds of things before. And it just helped me get over the hurdle. And I'm so grateful for that. All right, so logistics. How do I access Patreon? Probably one of the biggest phone calls or communications I get is I'm trying to log in and I can't. My password's not working because Patreon is not my website. So if you're logging into my website expecting to get to Patreon, it's two different things. It's like Netflix and Donna Downey. So I'm at Patreon. So I'm a studio at Patreon. So just wanted to share that with you because it is one of the things I get most often. I'm sharing this because I just wanted to show you that it isn't my website, but it is the URL. Find a creator. I mentioned that earlier, that everybody's a creator. Why? That's such a weird thing, but it's basically find another artist on Patreon. And then where the login is up here, this is how you're going to log in and create your account. I share that with you because the second question that I typically get is, I can't access any of your content. And it's usually because you're not signed in. It doesn't know that you are a member because you're not signed in, and it's just going to stop you from everything. So, all right. So here's the tiers, kind of a snapshot of what they look like. There are some things I want to point out here, though, that I didn't go over. So number one, I did talk about the annual membership. And if you look under each one, it says you can save 10%. But the other thing is there is a little video based off that wonderful feedback of how do I know what you do in each tier? Like, how do I know what tier I want to sign up for if I don't know what the hell you're doing over there? So I put together a little bit of a video for each tier focused on the content that's there. And then you'll see on the bottom, there's a box, and each tier randomly, I change them like every 6 months, every 3 months, but there is exclusive. So I send out merch. After 3 months, you might get a t-shirt if you're at the $49 tier. You might get a sticker, you might get a poster, you might get a mug. I've done a whole bunch of different things. And basically these are fulfilled by Patreon. And it kicks it automatically. It says, oh, I know that you've signed up, Terry, at the $49 tier for 3 months. We'll send you out the t-shirt. And I design the t-shirt. Usually it's a design based off of something I'm doing. And it just is exclusive just for those tiers. Right now, I just changed this visual. There are 295 posts over on Patreon. Now, Patreon reads like a blog. So they are also working on that. I'm a part of the Patreon ambassador program, which means they solicit the feedback from the artists that are developing content on Patreon. And one of the things is the organizational thing, is a lot of us have some issues with. So they are working on organizing it a little bit better. I'm hoping by summer, a lot of those things will be implemented, but right now it reads like a blog. And if you remember the days of blogs, it's just kind of every post is kind of stacked. Well, one of the things they do have, which is something that's kind of hidden unless you know to ask for it, is I've done a couple organizational things within the realm of what Patreon will offer. So I've created these 5 boxes here. Why are they important? Because let's just say you're at the $5 tier and you're like, I just want the inspiration any days. If you click this box here, you can just be taken to all the posts. I've tagged them appropriately. So anything that's inspiration any day will be there. These are just public posts. So maybe you don't have a membership, but you want to see what's happening over there that I'm making public. This is your $5 tier. This is your $20 tier. This is your $49 tier. If you just want to know what you have access to, and it kind of gives you the difference numbers wise of how many posts you have access to as well. So, and this is an old graphic. It's actually a lot more posts than that, but I didn't change the graphic. But this little thing here, this is a drop down menu, and I've tagged. So I've put little notes at the end of each lesson. So if it's a color lesson, or if it's a tutorial, or if it's a figurative lesson, or a floral sculpture, I'll have tagged that. So you could click one of these things. If you're like, I know Donna has some art challenges, I just want to see the art challenges that she's done, you click here. If you just want to see anything that has to do with sculpture, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of look that way. The other ways you can look is by media type. So if you're looking for a video, or if you're looking for an image post, or a podcast, or a poll, this drop down will tell you what kind of post I made. This is the tier. So if you don't push these buttons here that separate the tier, you can just say, I'm a $5 fan. I just want the content that's available to me here. Or if you're like, I know she posted something in January, you can put the month, or you can simply just search dogs. I don't know, whatever you want to put in there, and you see what comes up. So it is a little bit clumsy. Admittedly, the way Patreon has it done, and they are working on the better organization. I'd love for there to be sidebar and you can just kind of tag down. But for right now, this is what we have. So when you get in there, there are some things to navigate around. And a lot of times I even now put on the bottom, if you want more color study posts, click here so that you can be automatically taken and you don't have to navigate through. All right. So the other thing, second to last thing that I'm going to mention is I have goals. So one of the goals is to get to 500 patrons. I am somewhere around, this is an old graphic. I hover around 350. So sometimes it's like 340, sometimes it's 370. But I'm trying to get to 500 patrons. That's my goal. And then when I get to 500, I'll be putting out 2 inspiration any day lessons. Sorry, someone's calling me. 2 inspiration any day lessons a month. And that makes your $5 worth $10. Making that up as I go. Clearly, math is not my strong suit. Anyway, that is my stick here over this Patreon, trying to educate, but I know that that probably opened up a lot more questions for you. So I am going to stop the share and bring me back on and open up the floor for any questions that you might have, or maybe I opened up more questions too about Patreon.
So with Patreon, do you have to have like a lot of content pre-made, or can you start from kind of square one and go from there?
Great question. Okay, so I think everybody could have a Patreon. Like if you're a creator, why not? It's free unless you have patrons, and then they take a portion of the fee. So if it's $5, they take, I don't know, 80 cents or something like that. It is better to have content. I mean, think of it as a consumer end. When I go there, what am I going to see? But that said, there's no reason why maybe you don't have an audience right now, but you can't be building your content on there or trying stuff. You can even make all the content you put on there free and accessible so that future patrons know where to go. They can see your content and they can decide whether they want to, now that you are offering this $5 tier, they want more of you, because maybe you're just offering everything generally, and then you're like, but now I'm going to start a flower club, and in order to be a part of it, you have to pay. So that's a great question. I would say don't say I'll start it when I have enough content, because it's harder to get a following. Because when you go to YouTube, you can just see, and then you'll watch a video and then you'll follow them.
Right.
I like what they do. There's no money, there's no nothing. So following people is something we do regularly. But in order to turn over our money, you better convince us. So Patreon, it's harder to get someone to say, I'm going to just support you. It's usually someone that's been supporting you that says, oh, now you're on Patreon. So it's harder to do that, to develop an audience on Patreon, I will admit.
Okay. So my goal is to retire, right? I want to retire and build an art business within 2 years. Is that something that's doable? I guess I'm looking at you. You've done it in 2 years.
Would you say I've done it?
You've done it with Patreon in 2 years. You said it was good.
I did have a following though before.
Yeah.
Yes, it depends on what retirement means to you. Is it
just a
a
little
side
extra
hustle, a little
Yeah.
bit of income to support your habit, or is it paying
Yes.
a mortgage? It's a
No.
lot tougher to pay the mortgage. But yes, I mean, here's the thing. It's a dog eat dog, like any business out there would be, to be an entrepreneur. But no entrepreneur has ever been an entrepreneur without taking a risk and to putting that out there. So the bigger question is, do you have the cojones to be an entrepreneur, to start the business, right? Like, and if you're like, yeah, I do this in my sleep, I would live it, eat it, breathe it. That's what I'm doing. I want that. Then hell yeah, you have to do it, because that's what your heart is telling you to do, right? But you want to start now. So if you record anything, or even take pictures, because you don't have to have have you started a Patreon yet? Like,
I've got an account and I started following you. That's all I've done.
Let me, I'm going to open up the back end of Patreon just to show you but I have to get there. So there we go. All right, so now I've opened up what it looks like in the back, and I'm just going to share my screen. It's like the ultimate in multitasking.
So then too, can you kind of like join me in Patreon on your Facebook posts and on your Instagram posts and on, because I do have both of those, right? So then you try to pull everybody from there into Patreon.
100%. But like I said, it's not always that people are like, sure.
Yeah, no,
especially because it's a new platform.
Right.
So it's scary. I mean, probably the way you are thinking of it, it's scary. It's new, right? So most of the reason to do this webinar is to take the fear out of what is happening when I go there. Like, why
Yeah.
do I have to go to this Patreon and what is it? Is it a scam?
Yeah.
So these are the options you have to make a post.
Okay.
And like I was saying earlier, Patreon does all the work. So these are options. And I don't have to pay some kind of designer to do this. And so, if you want to post just a text, like a Facebook post without photos, you can just do that. You can do images. And I've done like more than 12 images posted. So I don't think it's limited. Video tutorials. Now they use Vimeo.
Okay.
So I have an account on Vimeo, but you could also upload to YouTube and just take the link and put it in as well. But they do work more so with Vimeo.
That's good because
You could do a live
that
stream.
too.
I don't love their live stream. Not gonna lie, because you have to go through YouTube, but they are working on
Okay.
developing a live stream within, because I think that's why I do Zoom. I like the availability of people to talk and see each
Yeah.
other. So they are working on that. I think it's a major thing to do. There's a lot of podcasters. So there's a lot of audio. But that's a cool thing too, because what if you have an interview with somebody like, hey, I'm at the such and such, and you just want to interview? It's a cool thing. Just putting a link, like, hey, here's a link to whatever. And then there's polls, which I kind of like the polls because it encourages the interaction. I'm trying to see if there's anything else here. I think that's probably the crux of it. So it is very user friendly. And
Good.
you could just keep making posts and just keep inviting. And I also believe, and this is not something I thought 5 years ago, so I'm a kind of a changed person about it. But I kind of went through my divorce and realized my husband was running my business, and it was very I was a commodity. How I was being commercialized. Here, sell this. I do this. This is how much I sold. This is how I value my worth. And when I realized that, I was like, that is exactly how my website is structured. Here's me, buy this. And Patreon, when I found it, it was like, yes, this is how I rather be. Yes, I need to make a living, but I want the fans that want to be a part of what I'm doing. My Instagram was hacked a few years ago, and there was like 25,000 followers on my Instagram, but I realized like 100 of them were maybe active. So they were, yes, it's great to have that many followers and it's a great thing to boast. But the people that really matter, the community, if you just have 5 people that support you and they're paying $10 a month, that's $50 a month you didn't have before.
Right.
And these people are buying onto you, not just what you have to sell. And so for me, the change felt like a rebirth. Like that's why, I mean, Patreon's not necessarily the second coming, but it did give me a second chance, and it allowed me the space to redefine myself. And that's what I hope everybody can get out of Patreon. It's a space. It's a hard sell to the public if they don't know what it is, but if they do know what it is, it's a no-brainer. So the hard work is explaining it and sharing it and saying, don't be afraid to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I want to be a part of for sure. So I just needed
but
to
it
know.
is a commitment. So once you have a
Yes.
patron, if you decide I don't want to create something this month, they'll tell you.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a commitment for sure. So,
Yeah.
but offering it for free for a while until I feel like I'm ready, then that would probably be my best way to go.
And there's a lot of artists, so maybe even search out other artists on there, because you can see, because some of, like, I post some free stuff, they post some free stuff. You can follow artists so that when they do post free stuff, you'll get a notification. But see how they set up their tiers, how they interact. And because it is exclusive to each artist, how they set up their Patreon,
Right.
every person has a different perspective on it. I don't know if you know Elizabeth St. Hilaire started her Patreon just after me, and she decided she wanted to just have one tier. It's a $25 tier. There is no levels. It's just, if you want a part of it, just join at this tier. And that works for her. For me, it just wasn't it didn't fit into what I did. I
Right.
do so many different things. I wanted to be able to break them up. So I would tell you to jump around and see how other artists are structuring. But I will tell you this, even Patreon says, do not do a $1 or $2 tier,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's just, it's giving away, like, because there's people, the argument is, but I have 500 people at $1. That's $500. But when you take the fees out,
Yeah,
and they probably would pay $3 so that you could make $2.
right, exactly.
So they just tell you to be careful of doing a $1 or a $2 tier, but you will see a lot of them.
Okay, good to know. Like, what's the point then? Really? You may as well give away free content.
But I think it's the difference too of like, oh, I have followers,
Right.
but I have 500 $1 followers, which is great. But again, if they're willing to pay $1, they're probably willing to pay $3 so that you can make a buck.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, that's really good.
Awesome.
I think that's about all the questions I have until I get into doing it, but that's
Yeah.
good.
Well, and if anybody else has questions, please feel free to shout out. I'm going to share with you, just for staying and just being a part. My inspiration any day, one of my inspiration any day lessons that was exclusive before, and I just made for you guys. Where is my chat? There it is. And I'm just going to put this link in there. So this will take you to one of this is the $5 tier. This will take you to the inspiration any day. I think this is number 24, but I believe there's 29, 30 something maybe at this point. And so if you click that link, you'll be taken over to Patreon. I'm available at pretty much all times. So if you have a question after this, or if you just, want to ask me because you're starting Patreon, another question, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm just going to put my email. I think it's probably so available, but it's not rocket science. I can't spell my name, but it's Donna at donnadowney.com. So if you do have any questions, just feel free to message me. All right, Guy, I appreciate you spending your afternoon with me. I'm going to go back to watching the Olympics.
Yeah.
And not to
That's
get
awesome.
too excited, curling is on.
I know. Awesome. Thank you very much,
Alrighty.
Donna. Thank you. And you
Bye-bye.
have a great Sunday.
You too.
Bye-bye.